You cannot satisfactorily describe a fool to a fool. That gets awfully close, if not being a single digit, to being a fact. We could say that not many people should be trying this, but I will accept the fact that those of you who responded with a chortle sensed some validity to it. That by some definition, if we were talking about a person over here who is a fool, by some definition, you cannot satisfactorily, not cynically in the attempt, not sarcastically, but to take a, quote, fool and describe what a fool is to the fool. Think about it a second. Why would this be so? Can you describe anybody to themselves satisfactorily? See, the first one was a springboard, so that you would try a couple of triple gainers and maybe hit your head on the board, and then I'd say, can you describe anybody satisfactorily to themselves? The truth is, let's move along at a rapid pace. The truth is you cannot, not at city level, not the ordinary level at which people intellectually operate, you cannot. This gives rise to a whole very interesting spectrum of phenomena. That is, it gives rise to the behavior that states that you absolutely can. The spectrum runs all the way from the non-traditional aspects of graphology, astrology, phrenology, or whatever it is, of reading lumps on people's heads, telling what they are by their nose, or by, of course, looking, as Kyrie pointed out to that guy, reading somebody else's handwriting, charting somebody else's scope. From all of those ways, which I can, in a non-hostile manner, sort of make light of, simply because they're out of the mainstream. I can't say they don't work, but that's synonymous. If they worked, they would be mainstream. All the way from that to psychiatry, to religious tomes, to the supposed revealed words of prophets from the gods. All of it says that a person can have themselves satisfactorily described to themselves. Throw down the cards, read the tea leaves. Let me see your palm. Yes, what is it? All the ways that right now are out of the mainstream, that is, that they are less than efficient to the majority of the people. It's the mainstream of life's cellular collection known as men. But there are people, sizable numbers of people, that insist that you can know something about yourself by writing down a page in your handwriting, and somebody who, quote, knows what they're doing, whatever the hell that means, that they will look at it and will satisfactorily describe you to you. It won't work, and therefore many people pursue it. It is not valid, that is, it does not change behavior, it does not give new information, it does not offer new holes in old things through which one looks and goes, and it changes how they operate. It changes their nervous system's vibration rate with the rest of life, where they are. It does not happen. Therefore, it has very staunch followers. Then you move in my spectrum that I pointed out into that which seems to be more traditional. Those kinds of areas to which men are more accustomed, of religions, the soft sciences, psychiatry, psychology, traditional wisdom itself. But no one ever feels, correctly so, no one ever feels that they have been satisfactorily described. Never. And yet people insist that it's possible, and it has been done, and they know it's not true. And there is a reason. There is a topological reason. There is no one else capable of describing you to you. It would have to start somewhere, not in the city. Because to begin with, the person would have to have the ability to correctly survey themselves. And that would put them in the position of being on higher ground, and they would see how everyone else is hung up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I? Sounds too much like that great semi-sub-God, Mr. Swift and Mr. Hormel may have us. Wired up, that's the word, not strung up, not hung up. I didn't mean that. A person who could satisfactorily describe someone else would have to have not only the ability to correctly describe themselves, which if they had the ability, they don't describe themselves, they simply see what's going on. And then they can defend Mr. Hormel and Mr. Meyer's place in the great scheme of things, but I don't have time. They would have to be able to do that, and then they would see where the person wishing to have themselves described, they would see where they are wired up. See, I didn't say hung up. Where they are wired up in the scheme of things, and the person who had the ability would also see that if I tell you, you're not going to hear it. So therefore, in the city, no one can be satisfactorily described to themselves. But I wanted to start off because everyone has the feeling that there's somebody blatantly here and there to deal in a certain amount of verbal or just that there are at least a few people who are perhaps intellectually my inferior. There are perhaps people who qualify as being fools. And isn't it weird that if you get to such a point that you actually qualify for being a fool, that no one, your best friend, a rabbi, a priest, your mother, your father, your brother, cannot satisfactorily describe to you what a fool is? Because you're too big of a fool to hear it. It just can't be done. And that just seems to have some real validity. Even those whose little wired up hearts tend to bleed for the nature of life. They might say, well, that's a shame, and it can't be true. Those people can be rehabilitated. You have got to be able to see real easily that somewhere in the wide range of the human possibilities, there are people around who are such fools that for you to describe how foolish they are or what a fool is, they're such a fool they can't hear it. And so everybody, to some degree, they might express some displeasure over having this pointed out in public, but they would have to agree, yeah, that's possible. But then, lacking the ability to have the far end, the upper end of the nervous system run in such a way that they have a continuing non-seamed awareness of life, they cannot hold this time background to see that this is a seamless universe and bring it up to the point all the way from this one or two sad examples perhaps of someone being such a fool all the way up to dangerously close to you and me, that the waves are now lapping up at the gunnels. We're all about to be swamped unless we deny it. All right, maybe a fool, but not the rest of us. A man can correctly be described. In fact, I've worked all my life on studying myself. And if a man could hear, he would just put his little ear over the edge of the boat there at the rail, and he would hear the waves lapping. And he would realize that the island of fools, rather than be like this, he can almost reach out and touch it. That's how close to him. But you have got to be able through, and you, of course, that is one of the benefits of patchwork consciousness, is that, all right, you can bring out some of these things, say you, like a fool, and not being able to describe a real fool to a fool because he's too big of a fool to hear the description. All right, that's one thing. But there is some quantum step somewhere between that and us ordinary people. Yeah. Right. There always is there not? What's the whole point of having periods? What's the whole point of the illusionary field of conclusions? That, all right, we can say that about fools, and of course the great word but, we can say that about real fools, but we have a different situation when we get to ordinary people like myself, period. It doesn't matter in the city as always, but I am still trying to push some of you to nudge you in a certain area for the last week or so. And one of it is to see, not that I'm bringing this out as any sort of final judgment of certain aspects of human nature at the ordinary city level, but all of you have got to see that under ordinary conditions you cannot correctly be described to you. You cannot satisfactorily be described to you. I'll give you a second. It never has been done. I come dangerously close. I do enough things that even you never thought about people, and you think, well, a lot of that applies to me. I just never thought of that, never heard about it, and I bet I'll never hear about it except here. But still, at the ordinary level, you've got to see your teacher, your parents, anybody took you aside, whether it be for the sake of some admonishment, where they were just trying to talk to you, where they said, I'm your friend, I'm your mother, I got to tell you. I got to tell you about your schoolwork. I got to tell you about the conflicts that you seem to be having. The animus that seems to be going on between you and some of your playmates. And you said, what the hell is animus? And they said, shut up. The hostility. Oh, all right. And so they say, listen to me, my little darling, my little tyke. Listen to me. I have been observing you. You've been here in my class now for 3 months, and listen. And they go, you act so-and-so, and every time I see one of your playmates try to help you do something, you go around, you get all touchy, and they describe it. And there you are, you're 7 or 8 years old, and there's a person 40 years old with their hair tied up in a bun. And you say, why is your hair tied in a bun, Mr. Brown? And he says, shut up. At any rate, there it is, apparently your superiors, the people that know it all. You know, these people are the Zeuses to the real Cronoses, right? And they describe it, and they say, do you hear me? And you say, well, all right, yes. And they say, really, you understand it's your bad temper, or you're so jealous, you're greedy, and you're always wanting all your playmates' toys, and I see you get in the fights. That's the basis. Do you hear me, little one? You go, yeah, I do. And they say, well, you'll do better now, as long as you hear that and you work on it. So now you go ahead, and I won't call your mother this time, we'll go to the principal. Now you run along, and you walk out, and your thing was, I've been described. You had to agree. All the way from that, and your parents. Don't make me go through a similar example. Your parents have been doing it to you all your life. Now you do it to you. But I was going to take the other end of the spectrum just for a second. Is since that to some people, not the majority of people, but some people in life's body is already wired up to feel as though that don't work. And all they need to do is find one other person in high school or college, or they find a book, if nothing else, that says the mainline life of man is a pot of doo-doo. And they go, that's it. And it turns out it's a book on astrology, or it's a book on UFOs, or underground flying objects, or Atlantis still lives. And if you don't like the way life is running, you're probably an unknowing descendant of somebody from Atlantis, or a flying saucer, or a flying cigar. And a person reads that, certain types of people, and they go, yeah. And then life is wired up over in this smaller sector of life of its own body, its own intelligence, that it's almost sure proof that you're on the right track. You and these other people, because you're downtrodden, you're laughed at, you're in the minority, when you know damn well, you can feel it, you don't need any further proof, that let us say religion is a crock. And the people that say they know what's going on are full of it. So there's got to be an answer somewhere. You wouldn't have this hunger, right? And then you stumble across astrology or some philosophy, some cult somewhere. And you read a little bit of it, and you find out that it was persecuted, it was laughed out of town, or it is being laughed out of town. The government's investigating it. And the leader, or somebody, if they're still in charge, are always hollering out to the ramparts. We're surrounded. It's always a siege mentality that the oafs, the fools of life, don't understand what we're doing. Or perhaps some of them suspect it, and it frightens them because we're on the right track with astrology. So it seems to be proof within itself. But let me give you another fact. This should show up somewhere in Cairo. Anything that won't work is acceptable. It doesn't matter whether you are in the mainstream, that is the middle of the bell curve, or whether you're on the fringes. Now we're speaking about back in the city. We're not talking about here. But you need to see what the foundations are, if it just takes you a couple of seconds. the kind of foundations, the kind of wheels under this big foundation that's you that rolled you up to this place. And a lot of you keep trying to drag it in. You feel like that you are some sensation of the great Trojan horse, and I've opened the doors and let you in, and you're going to roll in still with this other kind of garbage. And you can't be done. Not just because I say it can't, it just can't be done. I don't have to say, hey, you can't come in here if you still believe that you're talking to your dead mother. That's ridiculous for me to tell you that you can't. I don't have to. You can't. Yeah, you think I've laughed at astrology or UFOism or Atlantis or all New Age stuff. And so you think, well, either I got a blind spot, or I don't know any better, or I'm being synodically, metaphorically. Remember this, you cannot describe a fool to a fool. And the way since somebody brought it up, that spurred me to some of this about ringing back up me saying that there's certain ways you can't fuck with life. Fucking with life is not just fucking around apparently with the external, remember, because the water is in you. And the fucking around with life is the fucking around with yourself of still trying to roll on the old kind of wheels of that which is unworkable. It produces no results, and that's why it's acceptable. Whether it's acceptable on a large scale, it's acceptable to you. Listen, I don't care what you say. I know astrology works. I don't care what you say. I know that there is some truth in the Catholic Church. They may not let it out at the ordinary Mass, but somewhere down the bowels of St. Peter's, the Pope and a few of them, there is something secret going on, and I know it. There is as much going on secretive in the bowels of St. Peter as there is in the bowels of you. Does that satisfy you? Is that good enough to find out? You mean I'm respecting and dealing with and trusting and dreaming of people who are not smarter than I am? Now you're getting close. Now you're getting close. And see, if you have any doubt, I know this is continued to sort of, it has a light feel the way it's coming out here, and whether you get it on tape or not. I'm not just here being funny. I'm not a comedian. If you've got any doubt whether someone is smarter than you or not, there's the answer. And if that does not strike you as clear enough, try and put that hand in hand with me pointing out that in the routine affairs of life in the city, New Age stuff, mysticism, metaphysics, not exempted. Anything along that line is acceptable in some portion, in somewhere in life's body, as long as it doesn't work. So all you got to do is ask yourself if you got even the slight ability to be a fripp, to actually use just the ordinary workings of the brain the way that they claim it can be used. To ask yourself, all right, all of what I pursued by reading, by studying, by daydreaming about, has it had any effect on me? The answer is no. Do I have to say any beneficial effect? Yeah, it may have had an effect. You now have to wear glasses. You got migraines. You don't eat right. Has my pursuit of blank, no matter how much you appeared to pursue it out here or not, you pursued it in here at least, which is the same thing. Has my dreams of blank, some kind of mystical activity, some kind of weird ideas that the dead are all around us and they're trying to talk to us and we just can't get our little receivers tuned to their frequency. Has that in any way benefited you? Now, of course, there's always a way out, because if any of you say yeah, then I got to tell you this, you don't belong here. I got nothing else to say to you. If you say that benefited you, listen, I'm not here to say another word to you. I'm not here to say, oh my goodness, what a fool you are. No, because even if that was true, remember I already stated I can't ever make you see it, so we're done for. But if you have personally, beneficially been affected through such activity, there is your answer. I can't imagine why you would put up with this kind of vague, almost bespoke insanity on my part. Go away. You're too good for this. You're too everything for this. My tacit implication, of course, being what I'm implying tacitly. Let me conclude this paragraph by pointing out again that the kind of, in a multidimensional sense, the kind of uselessness, futility of almost everything in the city vis-a-vis doing this individually. Another reason that's so, and another reason in the city that you believe, that you operate as though you believe, that there is a place that a certain kind of activity will lead you. To be made to believe that, and it not be true in any field, that there are no conclusions, again, I wanted you to see from a slightly different direction if you can, part of the purpose of this is to see that there does not come these continual, surprising, untimely ends to certain streams of energy. Which is that, in a sense, that institutions, systems, beliefs, the activities of ordinary men never culminate, never reach the goals that they're purported to be striving for. I don't know how many more times I'm going to say this. Not liking to quote myself. Just don't like to quote myself, by the way. Now, of course, normally, as you know, don't quote others. Not before last, I made the reference, plus a little joke, but I went ahead and used it about birds of a feather flock together, and I said I thought it was Shakespeare, and I got plagued for a long time. It's not. For anybody that cares, it's Robert Burton. As much as I like to quote people, at least let's give the fuckers credit where it's due. I feel much better now getting that off my chest. And I bet he would feel much better if he could feel better, in as much as he died about 1600. So I guess he'd like to get a lot off his chest, like half a ton of dirt. I was going to conclude this paragraph by saying you need to see inside of you, not just out here, not just me pointing out over and over that the Catholic Church can't produce Christians. The Jewish faith can't produce a real Jew. By their own definition, nobody can. Because if it did, and psychiatry cannot cure people. Because if it did, the easy way for me to put it, as I put it before, and usually some of you will giggle, is if it did, they would be self-destructing. They'd be putting themselves out of business. But that's not the end of it. That's just an easy way of putting it. That's just to describe the flesh. The muscles and the bones under that, to cut the corner, is to see that what it would do is, remember, the Catholic Church, Christians, Jews, and all that stuff are sound waves. They don't exist. Well, sound waves exist, but what you dream a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a psychiatrist is, no, they're not. There's something else. Whatever you think they are, there's something else. There's something else, and then there's these words, psychiatrist, Muslim, Jew, and Christian, and church. But it is not simply that they would put themselves out of business. What it is the energy that's behind the word psychiatry. The sound wave goes out, and you hearing it. Lots of people hearing it. Then they repeat it. Then some denounce it. And then some support it. Then some holler, let's hear it for psychiatry. And some go, fully on psychiatry. And some people want to shoot psychiatry. Some people want to throw it down and stomp on it. And some people want to put it in a balloon and send it up. And some people want to put it on their turntable and see if it will play. And some people want to maybe let it marinate overnight. All of these things go on, and so psychiatry, not the word, the energy, continues to bubble and move along. And I can't tell you, it's not possible for me to tell you the purpose behind any one line, because if you could hear it, I could tell you the secret. You're just going to have to see that life is using the reality behind psychiatry, the word. and everything attendant to it that I tried to describe by marinating it and putting it on a turntable and denouncing it and approving of it. That, Catholicism, philosophy, goodness, gracious, evil. The reality, the energy behind all that, life still needs. If it did not, Judaism, turntables, psychiatry would be where? They would be in that great land where dinosaurs play. You would hear about Islam, turntables, Christianity, and you'd go, Jesus, didn't I read something about that back in high school? That's where it would be. So it can't self-destruct. If it self-destructs, it will self-destruct. But right now, it's not going to self-destruct. There's no sign of it. And I'm not here to play Nostradamus. It doesn't matter. Maybe it'll destruct tomorrow. If it does, I'll be the first to admit it. I don't care. Doesn't mean anything to me. No. But right now, it's not. But notice, a part of the flow of energy of Christianity, Judaism, turntables, electronics in general, fancy cooking where people marinate stuff. Please notice, you don't have to approve of it. You don't have to disapprove of it. The son of a bitch is percolating, whatever it is. You can say, well, I agree with you. That kind of fancy food is a waste of time. What a dumb thing for people to do. You can say that if you want to. I don't care. It's nothing to me. Plus, if you'll notice, it's nothing to cooking. You can say that about electronics. You can go from a turntable to, wait a minute, you're talking about records. You're talking about music. Do you believe people pay money to buy a damn record and listen to that noise? You can say that. I don't care. Or you can say, I love it. I love music. Do you love music? If so, we could be friends. I don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean anything to music other than the fact that life needs this thing percolating, or else music would be now in the hands of the dinosaurs. That's it. But all of that, I want you to see, what I'm trying to sneak up on you, is all of that's taking place in you. And that's where you seem to have the problem of living in your head. There's all these things I keep planning. I keep replanning. They don't work, and I think about them again. And I try to think of a new plan, which is all a crock. You just think of the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. But every night, you slip into that great world of Hades, and you go down to the river, Lethe, and you take your sip. That is, in a sense, you die every night, and you forget that, hey, this may be Tuesday, but I'm living the same motherfucking life that I lived Monday and Sunday. But nobody remembers it. You've got to see that inside of you, there is no chance. There is no surcease from this, because if it did, it would be your demise. And if it happened over a long range, that you say, well, I worry, all the time I worry about my relationship to the gods. All right. If that came to, in the city sense, at the ordinary level, if that could be stopped for you, if you said, it's driving me crazy and I don't know what to do, if you can stop it, just tell me how to do it. If it were stopped over a large range, that many people stopped it, you understand it would be the death of a certain particular line of energy. Now, other than a long range, if it were stopped in you individually, that's simply goodbye. You died. You've got to see that is the ordinary workings of the human intellect, where I keep drawing the line through the nervous system, that I call city consciousness. It's as high up as the elevator goes in most people. They can't change it. They can't educate themselves out of it. They can't pray their way out of it. They can't have faith in such a way that they'll get out of it. They're there. You can enjoin, you can attack, you can preach, you can exhort, you can do anything you want to. And it's not going to change the level at which they're operating. And in turn to what seems to be your relationship to you, if that's all you do, you cannot change the level at which you operate. And it's always this kind of continuing spiral, if not, in the more dull of cases, simply a circle of guilt. And I tried to give you the gift night before last regarding that. But you've got to see that under all ordinary conditions, there is not going to be any peace for you. I like Kairu tonight when he pointed out was most people suffering is the only way they get any peace. Some of you laughed, and at least I had the decency not to jump up and say, all right, tell me why you laughed. You're feeling like you understood that. Tell me. Notice I had the decency not to do that, because you would have been struck dumb that you don't know. But it's a fact that in a certain sense, that's the peace That is, it keeps most people stable. That is, I'm on the verge of going nuts. But at least it's kind of, I'm stumbling in such a way that I seem to stand upright. Plus, I'm surrounded by everybody else kind of stumbling, like those little plastic penguins that would go down an incline. It's like everybody together, at least your little group, your community, your religion, your family, that you're all kind of shoulder to shoulder and front to back. You're so close that you can't really tip over, and everybody keeps going. But insofar as it's possible at that level that something miraculous is going to happen, I'm going to come to an end of a sentence finally and understand something. Give yourself a break. Of course, you're a fool. You can't give yourself a break because I can't tell you this. But that day is not going to come at that level unless you consider the grave, unless you want to look up at those nice kind of people who become undertakers, and just as you go, the final one, you go, what a relief. And they go, I know, I know. And of course, they don't know, but they just... But other than that, at that level, is what we were supposed to be working on, to abandon it. There's nothing to work on. There's nothing to change. There is no conclusion possible there. I wanted to pick up one I can't resist from Cairo night before last that didn't get much reaction. That he said, words to this effect, that you have not, well, never mind, I'm not going to try to quote it, I'll do it my version, which is the version anyway. Let me tell you that you have not properly, you have not fully explored and experienced a thing until you've dropped it and broke it. That is true. Dramatic pause for you to think. You have not fully explored a thing, nor experienced it, but you haven't fully explored it. You don't know it until you've dropped it and broke it. Now in the city, this is true, and out in the bushes, it's true off at another angle. In the city, it's true on this basis, that nobody knows what they're doing. It's true on this basis that everybody, oh, here I go quoting people again, everybody hurts the one they love. Forgive me, George Jones, or whoever it was. You always hurt. God, it's worse than that. Probably Buddy Clark. In the city, it's true that nothing seems to work out. In the city, it's always a matter of, hey, I didn't mean to do that. In the city, it's always a matter of, wait a minute, it's not my fault. Remember all those? All right, in that sense, in the city, a person does not feel, now nobody's ever thought about it this way, but listen, I'm not really going to stay on the city that long. It's not my intention. In the city, a love affair. Of course, I can point out the obvious. Something you saved up your money to finally buy. All my life, I have, more than anything in the world, I wanted a brand new Corvette. And a person feels like they love it, but in a sense, even in the city, listen to me, this is weird. It's correct. That the flavor of ownership, the flavor of me and this Corvette now are part of a system. Ordinary people don't ever feel that final, almost organistic final drop until they wreck it. Or at least split a fender good. That they have to, in a sense, hurt the thing. And then it's like, yeah. They'll be doing otherwise. They may be out there pulling their hair, screaming at somebody, running into my car and almost crying, ready to beat somebody's ass that run into them. But it's like the relationship between me and that car has now become, almost get out the whips and the chains. All the way from apparent material possessions, I'm saying you, to relationships. Which is why I was threw in, you always hurt the one you love. It's an old song, I guess. I got an anachronistic, too far with you people. It's not George Jones, it's really from the 30s, I guess. But you all know, I pointed this out, ordinary people, the way they deal with romance, in a sense, is just a form of domination, perhaps without a gun, perhaps without violence. But that is what love is in the city. But instead of just that short definition, I want you to see, even in affairs, just look. Out there, if you want to. Should I look in here? If you want to. Don't keep bugging me. Look at ordinary relationships. People do not feel like. Nobody's ever analyzed it. Nobody's ever spoke about it in this manner. But you just meet a new person, a new sexual mate, and hey, this is it. Or this is as good as I ever had. How great it is. So much in common. A few nights, a few weeks. You know, we're just kissing each other and hugging. We like the same foods, and we do all this. And it's just da-da-da. But the relationship, it's like it hasn't took. It's like a vaccination and you can't feel it. It's like it hadn't happened until what? I'll tell you until what? Until your first good fight. Until, in a sense, this relationship that's so precious, this is it. Never have I been with a woman that we have gone this long, and I hadn't had one complaint with her. She hadn't made one insulting remark about my looks, and the large size of my stomach and the small size of some of my other parts. Not one time has this woman done this. And yet something's wrong. The relationship is, in a sense, when you have dropped it and broke it, then it seems to take on some kind of, what shall we say, real human passion. All of that's true in the city. In a sense, you have misspoke the sentence. In a sense, you put a period in the wrong place. You used but when you should have used and. In the city, as strange as it is, some of you heard this, and as always, you heard it here first and perhaps last. In the city, you have not fully experienced something. People do not until they drop it and break it. Now, to me, it's the end of it, and I said drop and break it. I didn't say drop and break it permanently or drop and break it and leave it, because they'll pick it back up, they'll put it together, or they'll just keep a piece of it, or they'll hold it together, they'll rub a little spit on it and hold it. But they haven't really fully explored it. They have not totally experienced it in the city sense until they drop it and break it. You got to turn the tape over. Now let's jump to the bushes. Let's jump to the area which should be affecting, or would be affecting people properly, born into, drugged, attracted to this kind of activity. Now in the bushes, it's true that you have not, another, not just level, it's really bringing in another dimension, but you have not fully explored something until you dropped it and broke it. But in the bushes, it's this kind of sense that you have to willfully misuse it. And since the bushes has no language other than metonymy, tropes, similes, metaphors, then I've got to point out that I mean something else by misuse something, because it's not in a negative sense, but what it is to take the relationship that you have with something, an object, all the way from a car to a person, and then the kind of internal ponds, bridges, apparent internal systems, the apparent kind of relationship you have with you as being your own partner, is you have got to break it. You have got to interfere with it. You have got to, in the ordinary sense, you have got to misuse it. You have got to operate in such a way, even if it's just mentally, you've got to operate in such a way that you are, in a sense, somehow misusing the relationship, and it begins to shake you free. It begins to put you in a position that you are no longer staring at the thing you think you're supposed to be watching, but you can begin to look around it. And one of the ways you can do it, even secretively, with yourself, that is not necessarily observable, is you take that which is foolish and unworkable and treat it seriously. And of course, the good old vice versa. And when you get good, there's something besides vice and versa. Not only is there vice versa, there's also versa vice, but there's something else. And one of the ways to do it, to drop something and to break it. And you don't do it, of course, externally enough under the wrong conditions to be fucking around with life. You do not go into your job, if I got to do this for you people. You do not go into your job and sit down in the morning and sit at your desk and the manager walk by and you say, you know what, I was just thinking this morning on the way to work that this is the goddamn silliest company. I mean, it's not just, I don't mean just the people, the whole concept of having a company that's in charge of advertising. That our business is to advertise. Boss, did you ever think about how silly that is? And of course, if you haven't, I feel doubly silly sitting here looking real serious and you say, well, here's the account on the new laxative they have, and come up with something that will appeal to younger people. And I'm sitting here going, yes. Do you ever think how silly this is? Don't do that. But the way to drop something to break it is for you to realize that all the things that you take holy, sacrosanct, and if you don't like all those, stuff you take dead serious inside of you ain't shit, to be technical. And until you can reach higher ground, that's the way you need to treat it in the city. And see, you can't fire you, not the ordinary level, so you can do it to you. You don't have to do it there in the office. You don't have to do it to the boss. But to yourself, you realize here you are at the ordinary level. You must take being a 32nd vice president, junior accountant here in the advertising firm, you must take it seriously. You must, at that level. But Jesus, this is ridiculous. That is, it's ridiculous on the basis that it is not feeding anything that I want. Only this activity does. The rest of it, you got to feed your face, you got to pay the rent, you got to do it. But this is not serious, and you might as well drop it willfully and break it. And to see the son of a bitch is going to break, and I'm no worse off. Well, wait a minute, I've got to take, I don't know, there's some things that I'm just not going to laugh at. Now, I will point out what I'm really meaning by laugh is not the ordinary sort of laughter, because it is not even tinged. There is no microscopic amounts of venom and hostility. But it's to be able to break something and to see, I didn't break anything, I broke it, but it's not broke. All right, I did break it, but it doesn't change anything. Hey, I didn't know it would work broke, but it's working now broke as well as it did before I dropped it. Hey, it's not working any worse than it was before I broke it. Hey, I dropped and broke it, and it's working as good as it did just before I realized, hey, when it's not broke, it still ain't working. And everything in between and off at a right angle. Because it's not simply laughing and saying, ha ha, it is silly for me to be sitting here trying to work up enthusiasm and get serious over our upcoming submission to the client over a new laxative campaign. Yeah, that's silly, ha ha ha. I don't mean that. It's to be able to see that it's all broken. You drop it, you break it. There's no difference. If you drop it and break it and there is a difference, it's no difference to what your real hunger is. Because what you're doing there at that level has never fed this. It's not going to feed it. No chance of it feeding it. You haven't been looking in the wrong place. You hadn't just got the wrong kind of new age or mystical food. It's not ever going to feed it. You think that it's looking for some kind of spiritual, metaphysical. That about covers it, doesn't it? New age, religious, anything in there. Now, I made up a story for you last week. I mean, not before last, when I started the meeting. I made up a nice story for you, whether you liked it or not, whether you even heard it or not. Those of you who are still riding freight elevators. But it's another piece of great misdirection to believe that what people, that the hunger that they're trying to feed by this, from 6,000 years ago up until right now. People that may be picking up one of my publicly printed books in a nice little bookstore with some Mozart playing in the background and a cup of little demi-tasse with some cappuccino, and they're over there in the mystical section having mystical dreams, and even pick up one of my books and maybe just open it up and read a few things and go, ah, and they feel like it's something, and just, I'm going to call it spiritual, because they don't know what to call it. Humanity's never known what to call it. I'm on the verge of telling some of you fuckers what to call it. But they feel they even open one of my books just at random, and they maybe read something. And to them, it's spiritual. They may go, oh, I want this. Or who is this guy? Can I get more books? That even me, is what I'm saying. Words I can say that it's spiritual. It is, of course, there are a lot, but I got to suggest to you, it is probably the supreme misnomer. There is no such thing as spiritual. What the hell, what does it mean? I don't have time to go into that. And it's not an attack on, you know this, but now, it's not an attack on religion, it's not an attack on people. It is simply to say something is spiritual, you would have to say, well, you must be speaking metaphorically, not tropically. And I can say, all right, let's say I'm speaking metaphorically when I say spiritual. Let's say that all of humanity is. All right, you're saying one thing to mean something else. All right, let's cut through that. What is it that you're referring to actually? Nobody knows. It is a great misdirection. Now, in life it leads somewhere. That's because it is from one step from there into either mainstream or else some offshoot of religion. It's always that. But I'm talking about now for this. There's nowhere to go after that. Because what lies behind, where you have to make a turn, if I say, all right, there's no such thing as spiritual. There's no spiritual part of man. There's no spiritual something out in life. There's no spiritual information. There's no spiritual help. And you go, yes, there is. Yes, there is. And I say, and you say it's a metaphor. You're just trying to poke fun of it. All right, it's a metaphor for what? And if you belong here, after that question, you're left with, of course, you're left with what I've been trying to also hint to you, for the last week or so. There's no such thing as metaphorical. That metaphors themselves are metonymies. Similes themselves are synecdoches. That is, metaphors themselves are metaphors. And then you say, for what? For metaphors. For what? For metaphors. And we can play this forever. You can go skipping down, going blah, blah, blah. You can take things in such a way. That's what I was inferring by taking the silly, the unprofitable seriously, and vice versa, just inside of your own head. To do that willfully is to break something, is to drop it and to break it. Not to destroy it, not because you don't like it, but it's to free yourself from the kind of already established, the almost inescapable systematic connection between you and the thing, you and the belief, you and the idea, you and the feeling. You have not fully explored a thing until you have dropped it and broke it. It's true in the city, you got no choice in the city. Out here in the bushes, you got to do it on purpose. You got to make yourself do it. But it's still true. A couple of more little things then. Me talking about, off and on for the last couple of meetings, you recall that the proper way, in a real sense, to watch something, to guard something, is not to look at the thing, it's to look around it. To have a real, in the true sense, a 4D peripheral vision of it, so that it cannot be attacked, so that you can see where it connects with other things, where other things want to connect with it, where it could be assaulted, where it could be stroked. But you've got to have some kind of perception of the envelope, the moving environment around the thing, whether it be a person or an idea. All right, a part of this, I was calling to look around something, not look at it. Did it strike any of you, I'm going ahead and say it, that it is another view of my neuralizing? To be able to look around, but not look at it. Also, me pointing out to you, since the words lend themselves, and me forcing them to mean what I want them to mean, thank you, Queen, to think about something, not think on something, neuralizing, to try and get you to look, to see things without staring at them. And it's not just visual sight, of course, but to neuralize, to remember something without thinking about it, to handle something without touching it, to think about something without thinking about it. It's all the same thing, except in those areas where it's somewhat different. But other than that, it's all the same. In a sense, you can look at things, you can see things, and when you don't stare, some of you will be relieved to discover this. That to be able to do that gives relief from a certain kind of which you're probably not even aware, but to be able to see things and not stare at them is a kind of relief from a certain kind of well, especially you people out on tape, just remember as you go through life, don't try and carry weapons through the beeper.